As Manchester United approach their last 4 games of the season, the club are left in an incredibly tough position. With new ownership spearheading the club's recruitment plan and on-pitch responsibilities, there is an uncertainty over the manager's future, question marks over a lot of the senior players' heads, and a completely different direction in the ownership's mind. So we're here to break down how INEOS and Sir Jim Ratcliffe can reset Manchester United Football Club. Let's begin with what INEOS's plan is moving forward. As said by Sir Jim Ratcliffe himself, him and his team want to build a style of play that is directed through a clear recruitment plan, and a style of play that they will stick to no matter who the manager is, meaning they will have an idea of how they want to play football, and they will recruit both coaches and players to implement that style. Already this is different to how Manchester United have operated since the departure of Sir Alex Ferguson in 2013. They went from David Moyes, a coach who largely favoured direct and more counter-attacking football, to Louis van Gaal, a coach who wanted to control the game through slow passing, short directness and strict positional play. Then to Jose Mourinho, who again wanted to play a more solid defensive approach, recruiting physically imposing players and becoming hard to beat. Following on from him would be Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, who tried to play the United way, embracing the idea of youth development, playing fluidly, and trying to be forward-thinking. And then finally, to Erik ten Hag, another coach that was recruited off of a job where he controlled games, with an incredibly talented Ajax squad, attacking at a fast pace and pressing incredibly high. None of the managers who came after the last share remotely any of the same ideas. What this has done is provided each manager with a jumbled up mess of a squad profile, keeping in mind that no manager out of this group has stayed for longer than 3 whole seasons, with the club spending over £1.5 billion across 5 different managerial appointments in the past decade. Jim Ratcliffe has been quite generous to the Manchester United coaches of the past decade though, by saying that it's not always on the coaches, it's more on the structure and environment that is around them coaches. And he's right. Moyes, Van Gaal, Mourinho, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, Ten Hag cannot all be bad coaches. Therefore, the common denominator is the environment at the club, and what INEOS will be most importantly setting out to change. And the way they're going to look to do this is through a new plan with a new structure. And the way they're going to look to structure this new plan is with what they're calling a game model. Building a game model isn't just about employing a coach and giving them a style of play. A game model is a much bigger idea. It incorporates the context of the club, the players' abilities physically, technically and mentally, the tactical principles of play, and the coaching and training methods of the head coach, using these core ideas to replenish the look of their teams and the entire look of the club. And as spoken about in our most recent episode of Stick to Football, environment in a football club is everything. And it just so happens that Manchester United haven't had stability within their environment for over a decade now.
Right. You'd have taken Mount over Szoboszlai, you'd have taken Casemiro over Endo or Amrabat over Endo.
But not maybe for the fees, Gary, or in terms of
talent.
Not
as a player, and you'd have taken Fernandes over McAllister, right? You'd have probably taken Kobe Mainoo over Elliott, you might have taken McTominay over Curtis Jones. As a players, as a 5 or a 6. And then you've got Christian Eriksen as well. They've got 6 players in that midfield that I think are good players. Right? They might not be the best, but they're good players. Right. If you gave Jurgen Klopp and a stable Liverpool, that's 6, and you swap that 5 from Liverpool into Manchester United, what do you think would happen to those players at Manchester United if they swapped them over?
They'll be better.
Yeah, definitely.
That's my concern, is that, the 6 players that are there, why is every player dying on their feet at Old Trafford?
Because we mentioned it earlier, the environment and the culture at Man United must be horrible.
So the question on everybody's lips is, how on earth are INEOS going to change this culture? Firstly, structure. Before INEOS's minority takeover, the club structure looked like this, and when you compare it to some of the best clubs in the Premier League, their depth and coverage of the roles are few and far apart. However, since appointing people like Jason Wilcox, Omar Barada, Claude Blanc, Sir David Brailsford, and potentially even Dan Ashworth, and many, many more alongside that, the look of their structure behind the scenes has gotten a lot better. And these appointments aren't just to change the on-pitch performances, but to change the entire culture, environment, and standards behind the scenes. With this structure, Manchester United will recruit a type of player that passes a certain game model criteria, and this will be a consistent pattern throughout their youth and senior teams. On the flip side of that, any player that doesn't fit into that criteria will need to be moved on, and INEOS and Sir Jim Ratcliffe will have to be ruthless when it comes to who they're looking to keep and sell. Secondly, they will have to decide if Erik ten Hag is going to be the man to take them forward. And to decide whether or not they've been tactically good enough, we need to head over to the tactics board. Despite what you believe has happened to Manchester United this season, they have been nothing short of awful. In possession, fans are confused about whether or not Ten Hag's side are looking to control the game through possession or not. The Dutchman said going into the season that they have the profile of player to play a more direct style in possession. possession, letting players like Rasmus Højlund, Alejandro Garnacho and Marcus Rashford to capitalise on space left in behind by their opposition. However, by doing this, you're conceding control in every single match, and in this game situation, Manchester United are 3-0 up, cruising, and they have 65% of the ball in the first 45 minutes. They go long from 2 goalkeeper kicks in 15 seconds, handing the ball to Coventry, and in the midst of this, Diogo Dalot has inverted into midfield in the short moment that they have the ball. So now their back four is completely jumbled up, and bang, Coventry are back into the game. Losing control in football matches is where Manchester United's out-of-possession problems already begin to surface. When their opposition win the ball back, they are looking to build out through Manchester United's lines. And there is once again a disconnect in what they think they want to do in the press. United use a 4-4-2 off the ball with most of the time Bruno Fernandes and Højlund in the front line, looking to filter the ball down the channels. However, when they achieve this, the team don't press in unison, meaning we can often see the back line a lot deeper than the midfield and attacking lines, and this is what is creating the massive gap of space in front of their defence. Most frustratingly for the fans, when the team are on the same page when it comes to pressing high, we've seen good moments. There is a clear idea to go man-to-man across the pitch, as we know, meaning the back line has to go 3v3 if it is to work. Dalot was even pushed high up into midfield to stay with his man who's tucked inside, and from here we can see how well Manchester United have pinned one side of the pitch and clogged the middle of the park, forcing Aston Villa to play the ball down the flanks and try to play out of the tighter spaces. But the aggressiveness, collectiveness and synchronisation, most importantly, in Manchester United's shape pays off. They win the ball incredibly high up the pitch and generate a really high quality opportunity to score. However, they've lacked consistency all season, therefore the numbers don't gloss over how bad they've been at preventing turnovers, controlling games, and being compact enough out of possession. For example, they've conceded the second most chances in the Premier League this season through the middle third of the pitch, showing just how overloaded their midfield is becoming. They've conceded the second most fast breaks because of how end-to-end their tactics are when they're on the ball, and they are conceding the third most shots from them fast breaks, showing how poor they're set up on and off the ball to defend the space left in behind. And even when you look at their penalty area entries allowed, you can see how they're grouped with teams who are in the bottom half of the table, as they sit 8th lowest side by side with Crystal Palace and Wolves. Many fans are confused about the lack of adaptability from Ten Hag this season, in that if he's not got the current personnel available to press high up into the opposition's half of the pitch, why hasn't he chose to sit back in a more defensive block and deny teams that opportunity to get in behind? Well, in his own words when speaking to Gary Neville in his recent Sky Sports interview, he said that he didn't want to revert all the progress his team have made by going back to a more mid-block setup. It is simply about waiting on them players to come back and trying to work and progress with what he's got available to him, hoping that they don't lose their routines. Regardless if INEOS are to stick with Erik Ten Hag or not, lastly, it's quite obvious that this squad needs a complete overhaul. As mentioned before, they will look to recruit players that fit their idea of football and not the manager's idea. In the summer, they should be looking at 1, if not 2 central defenders. Defenders who are quick enough to defend on the halfway line, who are good enough with the ball at their feet to play out of a high press, and have the physicality and durability to defend 1v1 when they're dragged into wider positions. In central midfield, they have an ageing pair of Casemiro and Christian Eriksen, who were brilliant for them last season, but they're no longer at the level needed to compete for the big trophies. So the Reds yet again need another 1, if not 2 central midfield players, preferably players who stand out physically, can cover lots of ground, and are great duel winners, who would complement a player like Kobbie Mainoo for years to come. At centre forward, Manchester United have struggled to field anyone outside of Rasmus Højlund this season, and even he has had his own issues. And with Anthony Martial leaving on a free this summer, they will either need an understudy or a more experienced striker from whom Højlund can rotate with to keep each other firing on all cylinders. Even on the wings, you could say that they need a player or two depending on the situations, especially with Jadon Sancho. Anthony hasn't hit the heights people thought he would, Amad Diallo has been cut short of minutes ever since his FA Cup quarter-final winner against Liverpool, Marcus Rashford is not even half the player he was last season, and Alejandro Garnacho has provided great depth across the front three, but is more suited to the left. Scarily, you could argue that Manchester United need 5 or even 6 signings in the door this summer, and a lot of signings out the door too. So, do you think INEOS should stick with Erik Ten Hag long-term at Manchester United, or do you believe they need to bring in a head coach of their own?